22. So in 21, he says he's unattached to external contacts. He says, for the enjoyments that are born of contacts are only wombs of sorrow. They have a beginning and an end, O Konteya. The wise one does not rejoice in them. So this is what we were saying earlier. The reason he's unattached is because he has the knowledge. He understands something. What is it that he understands? He understands that enjoyments born of contacts are wombs of sorrow. Cause-effect relationship. Enjoyment or contact-born enjoyment is the cause, sorrow is the effect. So the implication he's talking about here is enjoyment that is born out of desire and attachment. It's not that every time everyone has enjoyed any contact that sorrow will result. Now, you can contact an enjoyment objectively. It's possible. If you contact the enjoyment objectively, then it's not a womb of sorrow. So the implication here is that the person is involved, attached. So there's it's an indulgence. Let's think of it that way. So there's two ways to relate to the world, and in the next verse he talks about suppression. This verse he's talking about indulgence. So you can relate to sense contacts. We either indulge, which means that all the barriers are removed. Right? It's licentiousness, that idea that we believe we have license, and we confuse freedom with license. We think freedom is the capacity, the freedom to do whatever I want whenever I want. So whenever the mind asks for something, I can take it. That's indulgence, not freedom. The other way is suppression, which is what we were talking about before. There's some half-baked idea or some fear of contact, whatever it is. We just outright reject it. And we don't deal with the desire per se. So when we indulge, it's a womb of sorrow. He says there's two reasons for that. He talks about the fact that they are fleeting and they have diminishing quality. So the problems with them, there's when we contact an object because of desire, we're indulging, what happens is that we continue to generate fresh desires for the object. So the extroverted nature of the contact means that we keep on going out into the object. The mind runs towards the object continuously. So we are creating fresh desires. Not only that, but once the contact is finished, what do? That was great. You see a beautiful sunrise or beautiful sunset. It's probably better. You're at the beach. You see a beautiful sunset. You're driving home. What a beautiful sunset. You're creating further attachments and desires for that experience. You're lingering in it. So the indulgent mode of contacting creates further desires. As we build the desires, what's happening? We're building mental agitations. More desires, more mental agitations. As we discussed before, it means a desire is an inherent sense of lacking something. So the stronger and the more numerous the desires, the stronger the sense of lacking something, the stronger the sense of emptiness, the stronger the sense of meaninglessness. Because we've got so many desires that are unfulfilled. There's so much lack. If we have no desires, no lack, we don't feel that we lack anything. We're completely fulfilled. And that desire is also that constant rippling through the mind. I want it, I have to have it, it has to be there. I want it. It's that constant agitation. So the more desires, the more empty and agitated we feel. And so the desires have arisen because of wrong contact. This is why it says, enjoyments born of contact are wombs of sorrow. You are generating further sorrow in the future by contacting the object indulgently. This is one of the aspects he talks about. The other thing he talks about is mutualization. So mutualization we touched on earlier. It's the effect of indiscriminate contact with an object. Objects have a diminishing value. Eat the mango now, it's beautiful. Have one in 5 minutes, it's meh. It's okay, it's nice, but not great. Have another one, it's pure meh. Next one is torture. Right? So there's a diminishing value. So we get to a point where we're no longer gaining any satisfaction from the object. But that's only one half of the equation. If that was all there was, it wouldn't be quite so bad. But the other problem is that because we have permitted the mind to run towards the object, we are developing a dependency upon it. And so what that means is that when the object is absent, our dependency is being impinged upon, and so we feel uncomfortable, we suffer. So we get no joy in the presence of the object, and we get displeasure in the absence of the object. Perfect definition of hell. You can't get joy from it, and you only get dissatisfaction when it's not around you. So this is neutralization. It has both of these aspects. So addiction is a good example. The addict is so dependent upon the object that to be without it, even the thought of being without it, is too much for that person to bear. But the contact doesn't bring any pleasure. It's just, you need it to feel normal. To feel like you're at some baseline level, you've got to be functioning with that object constantly around you. And so one of the examples he gives me to illustrate neutralization is that of eyesight. No one, until you make people aware of it, no one's getting any joy from their eyesight. I'm seeing things, of course I am. But even you go to the beach and a sudden gust of wind blows sand into your eyes. 2-3 minutes you can't see. Even that's disturbing. Or you wake up in the morning and sudden blindness. You'd be miserable because you can't see, your eyesight's been taken away. In the absence of the object, misery. But it's so ubiquitous. It just feels normal. I wake up, I see stuff. What's the big deal? No joy from your eyes. So we've become so accustomed to it that that's our baseline. And you can become, what's interesting is you can become attached and neutralized to any object. A human being is a sense object. You can become neutralized to a person. Talk about addiction. You can become addicted to relationships, addicted to physical contact. You become neutralized to emotional contacts, neutralized to intellectual entertainments. So this is the problem. And unless we know how to contact properly, then neutralization is almost guaranteed. To some part of the world, not to everything, but to some aspect of the world where we have a desire, we'll get neutralized. And so this is where moderation and regulation is so important. Intelligently moderating and regulating our contact with something ensures that we retain control of when we say yes and when we say no. We've got it on a leash, not the other way around. Not only that, but when we deliberately and intelligently put gaps in between contact, then it's like, instead of having 3 mangoes a day, it's having maybe, say, you have once a week you have a mango. Maximum joy you get every time you eat it. Now, how often you contact the object is entirely up to you. There's no prescriptions. Each person's got their own temperament. So what's too much for one person is insufficient for another. Each person's got to find their own level. But the idea is that there is a regulation of contact, and you decide what it is. But the whole point is that contact implies the intellect deciding, not the mind. Intellect, not desire, initiates action. INDIA. Mm-hmm. Probably the lamest joke, but such a good one to remember. It's a great acronym, it really is. So the other aspect with regards to sense objects being wombs of sorrow is that, again, when we're attached to something, essentially what we're asking is for that object to stay the same. or for that circumstance to stay the same. The world will change. Everything changes. Material circumstances change, the body changes, relationships change, other people change, exchange rates fluctuate, tax laws get rewritten, market forces change, people change their political ideologies, people change their values, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. If we're expecting a person to stay the same because we like the way they are, we are bound to suffer because people will always change. Or we change. Our own mind changes. So circumstances change. When that happens, if we're not prepared for it, we suffer. And so this is why it gives that example in The Fall of the Human Intellect. You go out to a lecture one evening and you come home and you find you've left your pen behind. No problem. It's like a cheap biro, who cares? You get home and you find, I left my watch sitting on the seat. It's more frustrating. That you can accommodate, but it's more frustrating. Or you go to the car park and your car's missing. You get home and your house is burnt down. You get home and your family's met with a fatal accident. Life will change. The question is our happiness, is our satisfaction dependent upon external circumstances? If it is, then we are on precarious ground, because when the circumstances change, our happiness is destroyed. It goes with it. And so again, we come back to this idea of self-sufficiency. He's not saying don't enjoy the world. Enjoy your families. Enjoy your wealth, enjoy your physical health, enjoy everything, but don't expect it to last. It may last. Your physical health might be there right the way through. You might have beautiful relationships with your family until the day that you die. Your material wealth might be there all the way through. You don't know. But the point is exactly that. We don't know. And so prepare for change. How do you prepare for change? By not being attached. You can't guess everything that might happen. It's impossible to predict all of the possible outcomes and think, well, if that happens, I'll do this. And if that happens, I'll do this. If this happens, I'll do this. Impossible. So that's not the way that you, to a small degree you can, but by and large, the way to prepare for change is to not be attached to the object that can change. Enjoy it for what it is. Don't expect it to stay forever. So, enjoyments that are born of contacts are only wombs of sorrow. They have a beginning and an end, O Konteya. The wise one does not rejoice in them. So, wombs of sorrow, this is the first aspect, that all of these mental agitations can arise. The second aspect is that they are temporary. So the question again is this idea of where are we investing our time and efforts? We invest our time and efforts and we get something. Now, if that thing does not last, was it worth it? So, you buy a painting, right? Hang it on the wall, and within 2-3 days, it's dissolved. Well, the paint has crumbled off, and the canvas is starting to, even the frame is starting to fall to pieces. That wasn't worth the money. Now, that's exactly what's going to happen to that painting. Maybe not in 2-3 days, it might be more like 2-3 centuries, but that's exactly what will happen. Everything has a finite time period. Now, what we've got to decide is whether or not the thing that we're investing our resources into, I don't mean our financial resources, I mean our internal resources, if it's worth the finite result. So this is the example that he often talks about when he's discussing vegetarianism. The joy that you get from eating non-veg food, meat, it's before the tongue, no joy. When you've swallowed it, no joy. That's the contact. has a beginning and an end, a very, very short lifespan. Is it worth it? Well, what's the price? Right, and so the question is, who's paying that price? So in that context, he's talking about the prices being paid by somebody else. The animals themselves are paying the price through their suffering for your joy. Is it worth it? If you think it is, go ahead. If you think it's not, you might make a change. But the point is that we're talking about here, that all sense contacts are ephemeral. They have a beginning and an end. Now, when you know that, what value do you have for it? If you knew that that painting was going to be gone in 3 days, what value would you have for it when you bought it? Now, he's not saying don't buy it. Just know. Now, when you know that the painting's got a lifespan of about 3 days, that's the value you have for it. You hang it up.
Flowers, yeah.
It's a better example. That's a much better example. You buy flowers, knowing that within a week, they'll be a little yellow. And in 10 days, they'll be falling to pieces. In 2 weeks, they'll be crumpled, they'll be gone. And so what's the value that you have for the flowers when you buy them? That doesn't mean you don't buy them. But because you know that they have this limited time span, you're not attached. So when the flowers die, they're gone. So again, this is the idea. It's knowledge that destroys the attachment. And he says this directly. He says, with the sword of discrimination, cut the tree of attachment. So it's discrimination. It's correct understanding of the way things are that allows us to give things their correct value. That's what frees us from the attachments. So this is renunciation. So again, you go back to that quote in chapter 13 of the VT. He says, true renunciation, therefore, is that capacity in you to set the right value for the objects and beings of the world. To understand them as pointless and ephemeral, even while you're enjoying them. That's renunciation, is just having a correct value for things. And when you have a correct value for something, you don't get disappointed when it changes, when it moves. So that's why the acquisition of knowledge is so important. It's primary.